So creatine. Where do we start with this wonderful white powder? You still mean creatine, by the way.
Yeah, just to confirm it. It's
Yeah.
definitely. That's an interesting thing. Taking it on the plane. You ever took it on the plane before?
No. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
When I went
Surely you just leave it in the tub though.
But this is the thing. So when I went to Saudi Arabia to that competition, people were saying in the chat room, like, "Oh, I'm taking this, this, and this." I'm like, "Fuck that! You're taking loads of white powders."
You'll have your fingers lopped
yeah,
off.
mate. Like, and the visa is like, no drugs, no this, no that. Fair enough. Their country, their rules. But I was thinking, I do not want to have any misinterpretation of what I'm saying, so I took nothing at all. But what is it? Where is it? Where did you get it from?
Can I start by saying, I would like, the same as you, I've been taking this for probably on and off 10 years now. It is one of the only supplements I've taken and felt an immediate response. Yeah. Pretty much an immediate response. And notice when I don't take it. Also, like the more I understand about it, I prescribe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, recommend
I guess it is in a way, to more and more clients. Like I would put my nan on it.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
I mean, definitely the stuff come out now in terms of memory and cognitive function, you definitely would.
Yeah. So let's get into it in terms of the structure, the systems, how it works, how it's operating, why it's important, and then we'll relate it back to our audience and who we help in terms of stressed out businessman or woman. Yeah. Exactly. They travel a lot. Like, what are the benefits for them? Of course, in health and fitness, above and beyond, just into like daily performance and recovery, and then mapping out into the, I guess that longevity really. So let's get into the function and what it's serving to do.
The key thing what creatine monohydrate does is, also in the body, lots of energy systems. Every muscle has a finite amount of what's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and imagine that's the currency of the body. So everything we take in will eventually be broken down through something called the Krebs cycle or anaerobic respiration, and we get ATP. Everything functions on that. So what creatine phosphate or the creatine phosphate system is essentially our very intermediate
I'm going to have to cut you off. I didn't do the clap.
Oh.
And he's going to have a nightmare.
Okay.
Trying to find that. Still learning this shit.
Should we start again?
Let's start again,
mate.
Right, let's get into it, Matt. Today we're going to be discussing creatine monohydrate. What is it? How it works? Its function, its benefit for every single person listening, not just a gym junkie who's in the gym 7 days a week. And the reasoning why we would now prescribe it to pretty much all of our clients. But probably a great place to start is its function and how it works within our body.
So every single muscle has ATP. So a finite amount of ATP, and that's the currency of the body. It's adenosine triphosphate. So everything we intake, everything we ingest, eventually gets broken down to ATP, and that's how everything functions. It's the currency. And what we also have, so we have a finite amount of ATP inside each muscle, and that's what they say is around 1 to 2 seconds worth of effort. So that's the whole granny flipping a car, 1RM bench press. That, imagine you've got 1 rep of energy stored inside the body, or inside that muscle, sorry. So it's ready to go, instantaneous, off you go.
Do you know what I always what I always think back to? I don't know if you read or heard about the story of the mum, and I can't remember how it came about. I guess they're in RTC, or her daughter was run over. And her baby was like semi-stuck under the car.
Right.
And she lifted this car enough.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It was here in the UK. Yeah. She lifted the car enough herself for someone else to be able to drag her daughter out. Just like a woman, I think she was in her 40s. That's crazy.
It is crazy. And that just kind of shows you that there is definitely, we can talk about another point, there's a mental parameter to how hard we can function and how hard your body wants to work. And we do know, like, for example, you can't bite your own hand off. Like, your jaw is powerful enough to rip through flesh. So in theory, you could cannibalize yourself, but your brain stops you. Like, you can bite down and it goes, literally stops that sort of motor control to your jaw. Going, no, you're going to hurt yourself now. We need to survive. but you could bite somebody else's hand off, Jamie. So that's the main thing to take away from that. So yeah, like I said,
we're locked in this room for long enough, mate.
We'll find a way. So like I said, ATP is the currency. We have a finite amounts on each muscle. They say 1 to 2 seconds, so one good rep of max effort, and we're depleted. The next thing we have is the creatine phosphate system, and basically cleaves creatine and phosphate to make ATP, and that's a bit more of it's a very fast acting system. And we say we have around between 2 seconds and up to 12 seconds. Obviously, these are argued values because it's very hard to quantify. I remember them saying about, in terms of how a muscle functions and its makeup, we know more about the moon than we do about how muscles work. So that's kind of the basis of there's a lot of estimations about how long things will function for. But the key thing is ATP gets depleted, then the creatine phosphate system takes over. And the theory is of creatine, and it is now proven, is that the more creatine monohydrate you consume, the more creatine phosphate that's in the body. And essentially, there's more phosphate that can be cleaved to make ATP. So you're basically, that 2 to 12 seconds could now be 2 to 15 seconds. You're basically giving yourself more energy for that system to cleave away and to make ATP quickly. After that initial creatine phosphate system's deplete its reserves, we then go into like anaerobic respiration, and there's fast and slow glycolytic systems, but that's a different story. But essentially, what creatine monohydrate does to us is it increases the amount of ATP, or allows our body to have more ATP readily available to sustain effort. And how that kind of carries across to making people stronger is taking it won't make you stronger. It's not like an anabolic steroid where it's actually changing your hormonal status, and that impacts how muscles is expressed and development of that. But what it is doing, like I said, if it's increasing your store of energy from 12 seconds down to 15 seconds, well, guess what? Then that 3 seconds, that might be a rep. And if I'm getting an extra rep every week, well, that's compounding.
Yeah. You still got to apply it in terms of the intensity. You've got to know how to train to that threshold that your threshold will extend. So as long as you've got, the capacity to understand that and push to failure, then you'll see the benefit. And that's probably the first thing I notice when I drop off creatine is, a top set of, let's say I'm doing incline dumbbell press or something like that, and I'm doing 50 kilos, my top set, maybe 13, 14 reps. If I come off creatine within a couple of weeks, it's like by 8 or 9 reps.
Yeah, he's losing it.
It's like and the drop-off's way bigger.
Yeah.
I feel like, and again, I'm sure everyone responds slightly differently, but whenever I'm on creatine, I feel like the phases of the rep as you're moving towards failure are a little bit softer.
Yes.
You can feel it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Whereas the drop-off's pretty much instant when I'm off it. So as long as you understand what training to failure and are close to RPE 10 is, you'll extend your potential with it, won't you? I mean, it is the most studied supplement, I believe, now.
Yeah, there's the big three is creatine, whey protein, caffeine. They're always the big three. And probably now, from what we'll talk about later on, in terms of the cognitive ability studies that have come out, it probably is now up there to be the most researched.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because I remember 10 years ago when we started taking it, it was like, there's this thing, it produces good results. You might get some water retention. It could damage your liver.
Yeah.
Do you know
watch your kidneys, Jamie.
Yeah,
watch your kidneys.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
And it was a little bit like, do we take it? It was strange, wasn't it? And then it was like, you dose with 15 grams for a week, and then you pull it back to 5 grams to maintain and all of that. And now they're kind of, like a lot of things in this industry, even with training now for muscle growth, studies showing that heavy partials can have, it's always evolving. So there's no one size fits all or no one quick fix. But now it's like, well, maybe you need 20 to 25 grams of creatine monohydrate daily.
Yeah.
And that can dramatically not just boost your performance, but then you start to get even greater kind of daily performance improvements. It's interesting. And I saw Rory McIlroy, obviously he's just won the Masters, but so all of his clips are circulating online. There's a clip of him, he was doing a YouTube video, and there's a video on the side of the buggy, and he's talking as he's driving it to the guy next to him, and he says, I'll take 20 grams of creatine monohydrate every single day.
Wow.
And now you're seeing that like a mainstream. So even in the last 10 years, this has dramatically shifted from something that's like, as you said, a little bit underground, not truly confident whether it works or if it's going to damage us, but some people will take it, some people won't. So now, like,
I think everybody takes it.
I think everyone takes it. All athletes will be taking it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's on any banned substance list yet, is it?
It's interesting. I think it was USADA. They mentioned, I don't know how many years ago it was, but they were on about banning it.
Oh, really?
And that kind of tells you how effective something is.
Yeah.
In terms of there's no hormonal influence at all.
Yeah.
But then to turn around, and they never did in the end. I think the same with the Olympic Committee. I'm sure it's at some point there's been a conversation around whether or not it can be taken by athletes.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it's never.
I was going to say,
it's never reached that stage where they go, no, you can't have that.
Yeah. Like you said, thankfully, because as long as it's open doors for everyone,
exactly.
If they decide not to take it,
don't take it.
Then that's on them. But I feel like it's such a. We're digressing here. We will get back to creatine, but going back to professional sports and doping and drug, like for certain sports, I always think to Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously great in what he does. Yeah. Obviously genetic freak. Obviously technically cheated, but probably everyone else in the field was doing the same.
Yeah.
But I also look and go, you're not a rugby player or you're not a boxer or a UFC fighter in which you're damaging someone's life.
Yeah.
It just creates a better spectacle.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
Do you know what I mean?
People want to see. It's something one about doing the I can't think what it's called now, but it's like the enhanced Olympics, aren't they?
Yeah.
People want to see how fast can you run?
Yeah.
How fast could you go? The people want to see that.
It's spectacle, isn't it?
It is, yeah, massively.
We want to see it faster, bigger, stronger, and that's the intrigue. If you're not risking anyone's life, it's not person on person combat or anything like that. I genuinely don't see if it's measured and controlled. I don't see the problem with it. I guess you get into the thing of like how do people break into the top spots of the sport if early on in their career they don't have access to.
Yeah.
So I get it's more complicated.
And I get it's you probably people feel as if they shouldn't have to do that, and I completely understand that. But that's like me and you sitting there saying, right, Jamie, I want to be an IFBB pro.
Yeah.
I'm going to be completely natural the entire time. You're going to tell me, Matt, get to fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to happen. And whether or not, rightly or wrongly, that's a very specific sport. But we do know you Ronnie Colemans, you Jay Cutlers.
Yeah.
If you, for a second, think they were natural on that stage, then we need to kind of come back and kind of have a little bit of a conversation about
send you back to school. Yeah. But even like my mind in sport, I mean, even with stuff like this, it always goes back to recovery.
Yeah.
Like playing sport at an amateur level, like football, for example, I feel battered after a game.
Yeah.
These athletes are going and playing 4 games in a week, sometimes, or 3 games in a week. If you're on a tour, on Tour de France, you've got to recover, you've got to go again. Like it's hard to do that without getting injuries and burning out, I imagine, unless you have
some supplementation
like or something going on. So it's interesting. But creatine, I'm glad. I'm not sure it ever will. Hopefully it never will. Let's go through the application for the people that we coach and that we work with. So let's just frame this. Busy executives or their owners and the founders, 35 plus, they've got kids at home, they travel, they want to be fitter, they want to be healthier. They're not massively stressed about being ripped up in the gym, but they want to be functional and they want to improve their health. What would you say is the biggest reason or the best application for them for creatine?
I think in terms of actual physical performance, like we've already said, it's not the silver bullet. It's probably the best training aid you can have, aside from caffeine. Caffeine will get you in the gym, sort of thing. Creatine allows you to push harder in the gym, in my opinion, or at least give you more reps. And I think that when you say to people, say, right, okay, this is not the silver bullet, but it's going to help you train better and slightly longer. And like I've already said, the more work I can make someone do over a select period of time, push more weight, whatever it is, more exposure to difficult situations, that's going to have a compounding effect in terms of making them adapt to that stress. So if I'm saying, right, Jamie, you can do 7 reps on 100 Ks for back squat, take some creatine, now you're doing 9 reps on 100 Ks, so I'll just gain 2 reps. So in terms of, that's almost like every set, I'm gaining an extra set, sorry.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. In terms of actual cumulative reps of work. And I think that's the key thing, is that you can end up doing more in less.
Bang for your buck.
Bang for your buck.
For these people that are looking for time efficiency, if you're crafting them, finding the time to work out, well, let's fucking maximize it.
Exactly.
And that can massively help them do that.
And that then allows you to get faster gains. So in terms of, and then look back to, right, okay, you've allowed to, more stimulation means more potential muscle growth. More potential muscle growth means more energy being used. So trying to lose weight, we do know being overweight and trying to gain mass in terms of muscle mass and lose weight is pretty hard. But if you're a novice, fairly untrained, it is doable because your body needs to adapt. It's when you become more trained, that's a lot harder to do. So then early stages, if I know you're burning more calories because you're lifting more weight, your potential going to grow some muscle mass and burn some fat. And
we see it time and time again.
Yeah, exactly that.
In terms of who we work with, like the amount of my clients who, I can think of a whole list of them now, but they've lost 40, 50 pounds, but they are 40, 50% stronger.
Yeah.
And their shape has changed. And then they get scans and their muscle mass percentage has gone up. As you said, every individual's propensity for muscle growth will differ.
Exactly.
But they're in a unique window when there's a novel stimulus, as you said, and you're going into something from not doing a lot and changing pretty much all your lifestyle habits. You can see some cool results. So that's a great supplement to that. There's again, I think we've mentioned her in another podcast, but I heard this on Dr. Wanda Patrick's podcast the other day, and it was a clip talking about the positive impact on creatine for cognitive function post having a terrible night's sleep, which is a commonality for the people in that sector, right? Again, red eye flights, long work hours, all of that stuff, like destroying your circadian rhythm, basically saying it supplements the deficiency in neuropathways after a bad night's sleep. So it's not just a tool. No, it's to get in the gym and perform well and to change your physique.
It's a well-being tool. It's now, more so than ever. And that kind of research just highlights how important that is. And it kind of makes sense. We've already said it helps the body get ATP. And if your neural pathways will function off an energy source, it makes sense that it's going to have a benefit, massive impact. And we said about before, exercising can have the same impact in terms of that the awakening. If you're tired, it sounds daft. If you're tired, go and do a little bit of exercise, increase blood flow to the brain, oxidization, you feel better. But I've already said for some people, if they're in between flights, long haul, fill in the blank, that just probably isn't possible. So the next best thing is give yourself 20 grams of creatine, mix it into like an electrolyte based drink, because we know that electrolytes enhance the actual shuttling of lots of different minerals into the body, because we need sodium, potassium to allow certain things to function. Smash that into you and guarantee, well, we know it will have an impact. And obviously the more saturated you make your body with creatine monohydrate, you're going to constantly maintain that level of saturation and that level of performance.
Let's go into recovery, because I'm happily admit, in terms of the pathways of how recovery occurs and how it improves recovery, I actually don't know and truly understand, and I don't know if it's black and white. But one thing's for certain for me, I feel more recovered
when you're on it.
When I'm on creatine, I'm training to the I'm training beyond my means before I was on creatine. I'm training to failure. I just don't get the same level of delayed onset muscle soreness, and I know there's other variables that go into that. But equally, if I do, they just don't last as long. And I feel like I can train again, the frequency can go up. And I feel like my response to more aerobic based or cardiovascular based work, my recovery there is improved. Now, maybe that's placebo for other stuff that I'm doing, but
that's my immediate go-to. I think normally when you're taking something like creatine, you're probably taking something else with it, because you're someone that's conscientious about, okay, what's going in my body, how can that help? In terms of actual raw recovery, I'd say that creatine's, I wouldn't class that as a recovery agent, but I would say in terms of, you said about aerobically and anaerobically, because it is giving us the monohydrate to get the cleave, to get ATP, you could argue that actually it will improve your baseline, because we are buffering that initial system before we have to go into different pathways.
I guess your metabolic stress threshold is kind of,
you're raising it ever so slightly, because you're basically saying, right, we've got a little bit more energy before I have to go and rob from somebody else, essentially is how it works. And because everything happens so quickly without us thinking, them subtle changes, it can it's not a placebo, because I think there probably definitely is an impact where obviously you don't feel quite as gassed, or you move a bit better, you feel more explosive. You think, actually, I'm sore, but I'm actually all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't, in terms of pure recovery, I wouldn't class it as a recovery agent.
I agree with you, but I wanted to get your opinion because it's something I observed, but that also, like I said, there might be a load of other things going on. It could be better sleeping patterns or whatever during that period. So what, in terms of splitting this up for me, I personally would do 10 grams as a pre and intra drink. So I'll load it, something like this, with my electrolytes. I'll put 10 grams in and I'll sip it like before and during the workout. I'll then load 10 grams later on in the day, probably with my evening meal. Would you do anything differently to that in context of the people that we're speaking about right now? I
think for day-to-day, like we said, day-to-day functioning, I'd say that's happy days. Get some in the morning, get some in the evening. There is, in terms of the research I've looked at, there's some people suggest you don't have to load anymore, but obviously now we know in terms of there's an effect in terms of the neural pathways that actually having that loading, there is a benefit. I think in the past, the papers I've looked at, they've primarily focused on this kinds of musculature output opposed to the holistic approach. That a lot of the research now, like Dr. Anna Patrick, they've looked at, where actually they're not so bothered about how the muscle functions and how that's helping performance physically, but actually what does it impact cognitively.
Sure.
So I think since reading that, it's probably changed how I'd say to some people. Like we said, if you've got execs that are on flights or busy work styles, busy times, and you know it's coming up, you know the next couple of days I'm going to be getting 4 hours sleep, 5 hours sleep, or it's going to be really, really crap sleep.
But we work with loads of people in finance and they come to year end.
Exactly. And it's
Jamie,
like, you've just got to get it.
I'm fucked, mate.
I'm redlining.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Right now, it's 25 grams in the morning. Get it in you.
Yeah.
Just smash it in, and just plenty of water.
So how would you, like I said, back in the day for us, it was 15 grams to load. You do that for a week. You then drop to 5 grams for maintenance, and then you would cycle on and off. I think it was every like 4 or 6 weeks for 2.
8 weeks in my head.
Yeah, something like that, wasn't it? And I can't remember. I think I went through like, at that time, I felt like a fucking rebel because I went like 2 years, never cycled off. I was like, yeah, fuck it. But obviously now, from what I understand, now we know that's not necessarily needed anyway. But how, to my knowledge, if you're hitting 25 grams, you probably don't need to load necessarily. If you're straight away just loading with 25 grams, you just maintain that.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's the way. Like I said, I think the kind of thing is when it was, take it for 8 weeks and come off of it, I think that was back to this concern about kidney function and liver function. I'm reading a study, and this is what kind of, and this is the thing, is people got to take kind of certain studies with a pinch of salt, because depending on the study control, the design, we already know, looking at the wheat industry in the 50s and the 60s, that we can manipulate data and people believe it. So I'm not...
we need a whole podcast episode on that.
Yeah, that was a very interesting one.
Yeah.
But what I try to say is you've got to take things with a pinch of salt, because you'll read one study that says X and one study that says Y, and they completely contradict. And unless you're going to spend time to break down study design, how they did X, Y, and Z, what kind of analysis they used, which, don't get me wrong, since you leave university, I couldn't think of anything worse to spend my time doing, because it is boring. But there's people out there that find it fascinating. Fair enough.
Oh, fucking use ChatGPT.
Literally, that's my next.
Do you know what I mean?
My next thing is
just find it, download it, run it into ChatGPT, and say, analyze this, summarize the points,
and it does it for you,
and ask the questions you
and
ask.
It does it better than probably most people will,
100%.
and probably most academics, because there's always going to be a bias.
Yeah, it's
very hard to not have that bias.
Yeah. So I guess the only issue with that potentially is you're asking for, I guess it, as long as you've got 4.0 and beyond, it will summarize up-to-date information as well. But you're asking it to collect this information from studies that have been funded by a company that wants a particular narrative out of that study. And then you're asking slightly subjective questions to it for it to summarize. It'd be interesting actually to do it.
Yeah, see what it comes back with. See what it says.
Maybe we can do that on an episode. We do it live.
Ask it questions.
Yeah, see what it comes back with. Then we can just discuss it, because that's an important, whether it's creatine or any other supplement out there or anything health related. As you said, there's a lot of corruption in terms of the funding and the results. and it's people's fucking health.
It is, and it's hard to sometimes decipher. But the thing that 8 weeks on, 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off, I'm pretty sure it came back to looking at like kidney function, liver function, because there's some studies out there that said creatine monohydrate, once consumed, turns into creatine, which basically becomes a toxin in the body, essentially. So, and it just gets secreted.
Yeah, but that's so I had my 2 blood tests come back, both of them elevated.
Very high.
Very high creatinine levels, and that's the first thing they said. It was like, do you take creatine? Do you train often?
Yeah.
And at that time, for the first one, I think I was like on and off. I'd always forget to do it. I stopped for the second one, and it was still high. But that's the first thing they said. It was like it potentially it could be that. So you can understand why, but then it's understanding is that function toxic to the body if you're excreting it. Do you know what I mean?
And it's like anything. If you've already got a compromised liver or kidney, then it's something you should definitely pay attention to.
Yeah.
But if you're the vast majority of people that take it, you stay hydrated, you consume alcohol to some level of moderation, you're probably going to be okay. I'm not a medical doctor. So, but the key thing
I think we can safely say that without having to have a PhD. So do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're going to be all right.
Yeah.
You are going to be all right. And like I said, the new stuff now with Dr. Anna Patrick and the cognitive studies is that we know that you just start taking 25 grams. And if you need it, and someone asked me the other day, because I was talking about this at work, I said, would you take 25 grams every single day? And I was like, well, I can't see why not. But I'll be honest with you, like, I've took 5 grams every day for the last couple of years religiously. I probably can I be asked to go on? So like, I don't know, but I know it's going to cause me no harm. It just comes back to the point: can I be bothered to do it? Which is probably not a good thing to say. But
yeah, I guess
if I knew I had a rough night shift and I had to come and function the next
use
day,
it strategically,
then I would 100% say that more so than just bang 25 in every day.
I think the people operating and taking 20 to 25 grams, they're trying to get the maximum effect out of the supplement.
Exactly that.
Pretty much we're saying after that 20 to 25 gram window, it's pointless taking any more.
Yeah, it's just
too much. Before that window, you're still going to get some net positive impacts.
Exactly that.
So from 5 grams to 20 or 25 grams, you can decide where you want to fall.
Yeah.
At 20 to 25 grams, cognitively, performance, you're at saturation point, you're going to get the maximum effect.
Yeah.
Do you run a risk of having higher creatinine levels in your urine? Potentially.
But
is that a sign of impaired kidney function? No, your body's just trying to excrete it. So I know what you mean. Do you want to necessarily load it? I mean, you can get it in
tablet form as well.
Tablet form, currently obviously not liposomal, but you can get it in tablet form, just bang in the tablets and then you kind of forget about it. So where would you list it so for you personally, and I appreciate everyone's different, where would you list creatine in your supplement
hierarchy?
Yeah, would you list it in top 5? And if so, where would it sit?
We take it into like multivits and omega-3s, or are we talking?
Yeah. Let's talk about broad spectrum, because I think there are people out there that will look at it and go, that's cool, but still seems a little bit underground to me. And I've got my multivitamins, I take my AG1, like I'm probably okay. So in context to all those things, I think it's relevant.
I say, well, you go back to like Arnie's era, him saying that creatine monohydrate wasn't really a thing then. But what they know, I remember him talking about, he said he noticed when he ate steak that he felt stronger in the gym. Well, we know that steak and red meat, specifically steaks, have more ATP, creatine within the actual inside that food, more so than chicken, more so than anything else. So that makes sense. We know that you can replenish your stores of creatine from meat, your creatine phosphate system. You can replenish that. We know that, but the amount of meat you have to consume to get that is ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous. If you're a carnivore, you're probably sound. Don't worry about this.
That's what I hear what Arnie said, and I do think, is that true?
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like he said some funny things in his time. Obviously, we know it tops your ATP up, but if you have a couple of steaks, do you go in the gym and feel like you've got 5 extra reps? I don't believe that.
You do when you just smash some tread on your cheek.
Yeah, exactly.
But then that's the argument to make, is that you've got someone that's taking pharmaceuticals,
yeah.
Is that a good, positive observation? Maybe not, but we do know that you can get it from natural sources. It's just that you can't get it at the same concentration and the same ease of use as you can in a powder or a tablet. So we know that's the case.
It's like the multivits or like the omegas. It's naturally occurring.
You can get them, yeah.
But this is an optimal way to do it to a level in which you get optimal results.
Yeah, and I'd say it's probably my top 5. I think it's just because, like we've already said, you can probably get your omega-3s from fish or flaxseed or something like that. You can probably get your vitamins if you eat 5 a day. If you were to pick and optimize the correct quantities of each different food, albeit it'd be a real pain, but you could do that. Whereas something like creatine, you just, like I've already said, you just probably can't get good enough quality and quantity to match what you could in a powder, unless you
are carnivore, you eat a ton of red meat necessarily.
Exactly that.
I guess that's an important point. As a supplement, if we just take the word supplement, it's probably up there with the best, because
I think it is
what it allows you. It's the most efficient way to supplement something that isn't necessarily hard to get, but is hard to get in the quantities. I guess that's probably similar for most supplements, but I absolutely agree. I would put it in my top 5. To be honest with you, maybe it should sit higher, because anyone listening,
it's beneficial.
I would say take it. Like you're only going to see, on the most part, like we said, unless you have like underlying kidney function issues or liver issues, you're only going to see positive things from taking it in terms of cognition, memory function, physical function, performance, pretty much everything. So
enhances everything you can
it's definitely up there, isn't it? It's definitely up there. Whilst you're on the subject, so if we summarize creatine, fantastic supplement. In terms of where to get it from, I mean, I'm not going to give them a shout out, they need to pay us for that. But as long as it's 100% micronized creatine monohydrate, you can buy it from anywhere. Like, you're good to go with it in terms of its bioavailability or absorption rate. Like, it'll be fine. Pretty much all of them are probably made in the same bloody factory anyway. So and it's one of the cheapest supplements.
I was just about to say,
what would that be, 10 quid?
Probably about that, yeah. And it's probably the cheapest out of all of them and the most effective in terms of recognize effectiveness. You can, like we've already said, you can take it and you can physically feel the difference. And it also gives you a little bit of bloat, bit of water weight, because it retains water. So it pulls more water, intracellular fluid into the muscle. So you feel a bit more of a pump. You're like, oh.
Yeah, that's an important point, because I've just put a client on creatine. He's seen a little bit of a jump in weight, and we're trying to drop his weight. And I pre-warned him of that But the first thing he said, he was like, feel stronger, pumps feel better, feel more muscular.
Pump's mad.
There's some misconception. It's not subcutaneous water you're holding it in the muscle. So that isn't, in essence, I hate this term, but it's good weight.
It is, because like you said, ultimately people want to look more muscular. And it's literally doing that. It's drawing water into cellular, into muscular, and it's pumping it up. Basically,
for a fucking tenner, you'll look bigger,
massive.
You'll feel better. You'll perform to a high level. No brainer.
Yeah, no brainer.
Top of the fucking list, actually, when I think about it, like that.
Yeah, when you put it like that, actually,
do you know what I mean? If you look at cost versus in alignment with its potential benefits, in alignment with how easy it is to take, and the potential side effects, it's got to be up there. Forget where we would put it. It's got to be up there with number 1, 2 supplements to take.
I was just thinking about you saying that now, thinking, right, what would be my 1 and 2? And I'm thinking, well, I thought caffeine or whey protein, but actually, your whey protein supplementation, if you're eating a balanced diet in terms of you're getting your protein from your food,
don't need it.
So okay, scratch that off,
which is pretty easy to do in this day and age,
massively.
Yeah.
And I thought caffeine's, but actually, some people are like caffeine insensitive, so it doesn't really do anything for them. So, and don't get me wrong, I've taken so much caffeine playing rugby over the years, it probably doesn't really work for me.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not it. And I'd say number 3 is probably creatine. So then all of a sudden, my number 3 becomes my number 1.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably is the top supplement to take.
Yeah.
I can't find a downside to it.
100%. Caffeine's an interesting one because it's somewhat addictive.
Yeah.
It can create inflammation in your gut and your bowel. However, it has some unbelievable effects.
Yeah.
It can actually be good for gut health in the long term.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Also with caffeine, I experience this daily and I absolutely love coffee. I went from not drinking it until I was like 19, did my first prep, was told to have coffee before my cardio.
To survive.
And then, from there, like, and I absolutely, nothing better than a sunny day. You sit down with a coffee outside, just chill. Nothing better. But what goes up must come down. And after a coffee,
crash.
I always crash. I'm always like, then you're like chasing the next one to bump you up. Then I'm trying to cut it off at kind of 12-1 because I don't want it to impact sleep. Then I'm like, oh, I love a coffee. Do you know, you end up in this cycle. It's like coke. Like,
it's like a habit though, isn't it?
Yes.
It becomes, oh, you know what, I've got 10 minutes.
It's a drug.
It's a drug. It is a drug, yeah.
So,
and it's like, I've got 10 minutes, I'll have a coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, when I'm at work, it's like, night shifts, 6:30, we'll have a coffee.
Yeah.
7:30, we'll have a coffee.
Yeah.
Lay in my little coffin bed, like,
wired to fuck, just waiting at the ceiling.
Any minute now.
And you just you're not going to get that from creatine.
And
so
exactly that. Out of all the ones you can probably take, it's probably the least impactful on your recovery.
Yeah.
Whereas we know caffeine definitely can impact recovery if you're wired in bed and your sleep's rubbish. We know that's massively going to affect it.
Yeah.
If you have a little bit lactose intolerance, whey protein's definitely going to upset your bowel at some point. That might impact recovery, inflammation, fill in the blank. I don't know of anyone that's allergic to creatine.
Yeah.
There's probably somebody out there that is. I've never come across it.
No. What would you say, because I've thought about this, we're segueing now because we've got onto caffeine. That's an important subject as well, because I think about this in terms of recovery. What we're trying to do on the most part, I don't know if there's any studies or data to back this up, but we want to be in a parasympathetic state in terms of our autonomic nervous system, right? Now, caffeine makes you alert, slightly raises your heart rate. Is there a negative, in terms of, from what you understand, is there a negative impact on your heart rate variability from taking caffeine because it does those things?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
I've not seen it, and I should have studied this before even bringing it up, so I can bring some valuable information to anyone listening. But it's something I think about. What is the impact of caffeine on my heart rate variability if during the day, and I know it's taken as an average overnight in terms of the score, but if during the day I'm sat down but I'm inducing this thing that slightly bumps my heart rate up and it makes me alert and it kind of feels like it puts you in that fight or flight kind of system. Yeah.
I'd say.
Is that having an impact?
I'd say probably is. And in terms of actual calling out the sort of empirical data, I've not looked at it itself, but in terms of subjectively, I know that there's times where, for example, like my last 2 days on duty, we did a training course and we're pretty much flat out all day. Didn't drink any caffeine all day. Felt rubbish the entire day. But went home and had some of the best night's sleep I've ever had. Next day, the exact same thing. Busy day, no caffeine at all. Another really good. I'm talking like 80. We talked about heart rate variability last podcast. I was like hitting 81s, mate. Yeah. It's almost like my body's listened to me bitching about it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm gonna show you. And there's a few times I think, and I said to Zoe about it, and she's like, all right, okay, like, doesn't really mean too much. I was thinking, actually, there's something too. And we know there is. I know people say, oh, I'm very sensitive to caffeine. I've always been like, not at all. But looking at it subjectively, sort of my anecdotal data and of what my heart variability is, the times in which I've heavily caffeinated because I've come off a night shift, it's been rough. Obviously, that's already impacted my heart rate variability. But even if I finish like my last night shift and then I'm on my first day off, it's still rough. Yeah. And I'm still caffeinating through the day. But the times in which I've had no caffeine, it's definitely elevated. It's weird because I feel like caffeine's gone through this transition of something that was like drink with caution and don't overload too much. And I don't know whether it's maybe a consequence of funded studies again, or whether these are legitimate. But now it's almost gone to like 6 cups a day can prevent heart disease and stop colon cancer and all this. So it almost starts gratifying the habitual thing. Consumption of it. If we just think about cost, we discussed that being a tenner. Yeah. You might spend
How much? Do you know what I mean?
Got
How
a
much you
coffee
spend
now.
on fucking coffee?
We might go buy 2 coffees now. I guess it's like £8.
And you're doing that. Let's say you got an average of a coffee a day, Monday through Friday. So working week within a month, you're paying like four quid a day for that.
Yeah.
And once you've had one, you probably want another, whether you get that in the office or whatever.
100 quid a month almost.
Easily. And one thing I'm going to do personally is avoid anything, good or bad, that alters state.
Yeah.
Like how I am. So I'm going to get off, and I don't have a coffee addiction. I have like 2, maximum 3 a day, but I'm going to get off it completely and just see how I feel and just watch my data and watch my heart rate variability. Because I'm not someone who gets, like, I've never had a caffeine withdrawal.
No.
And
it even feels like, what even?
Well, I think it's like apparently headaches.
I'd argue the people that are doing that are probably severely dehydrated anyway. And we know that
basically they used to get their fluid intake from coffee, and they've just stopped drinking basically. So they're a camel.
Yeah,
100%.
Exactly that. So that's because the interesting thing that talking about the diuretic effect of caffeine is it is a diuretic, but the quantities, unless you're shot in espressos or like the most concentrated amount, the liquid of which is
like
in
that Greek coffee over there.
But yeah, it's nice.
Yeah,
but that stuff's gonna like strip the life out of your stomach. But we know that, say, example, 300, 500 milliliter cup of coffee, the amount of caffeine inside that versus the liquid offsets the diuretic effect of that caffeine. But obviously, if you're drinking super, super concentrated, very minimum amounts of liquid inside that, there probably is going to be a diuretic effect because the amount of water going in versus coming out are off balance.
Yeah.
And that's, I'd argue, people that have that withdrawal probably don't drink enough anyway. And it becomes noticeable because all of a sudden the only thing I did drink was 4 cups of coffee a day. And now I'm drinking maybe 100 mils of water in the morning. And,
so true.
And that kind of has us back to, we talk about all this research and data. And what remember is that helps enforce our opinions and helps give us information of how best to suggest what to do. But these are controlled. And they typically look at one thing. Yeah. And there's a control group that does nothing at all, but they're looking at 1 or 2 factors, and they don't always, and a lot of the time, having worked with data, is that you'll get things that are curveballs and you'll just dismiss it.